Brilliant, 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 brilliant. We are live. We are live. We are live. Hello, 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 everyone. Let's do all the sharing and we'll get going. I'll wait till everybody comes. Just this is a peculiarity, by the way, of Facebook and lives, that even though you have an event, you can't like join ahead of time. You have to wait until it comes live and see it live and then join. So there's always this bit of lag. It can't be avoided. Yeah. It can't be avoided. That's just the way it is. I'll add it to the guide while we wait for those to join. Yeah, I know many watch it on watch it on the replays, but still, it's just a weird thing. So on the replays, you just have to skip forward a bit. All right. So if you are in group and you're looking for this just for future reference, just refresh at the time more or less, because it doesn't automatically sometimes show depending on you. Oh, thank you, Norma. Yes, yes. Now, the background that I'm choosing is the background that's coming up for Sunday. So it's the first photo background slide of the next. Or I use the current week's one, but I switched to the Sunday one already because I made the announcement. so that's where this is from. It has particular meaning, as you'll see on Sunday. This particular background, it's meaningful. It matters. All right. So now one more thing to do, and then we can get going. Pin it to the top as well. Pin it to the top of group. In order to do that, I have to refresh the page. Little fiddly things, little fiddly things. That's why when Bina's, I don't think she's not doesn't have internet connection right now because she's not on. But that's why usually Bina's doing introduction of some kind here while I do these little fiddly things. That helps. It is a solar eclipse, yes, Elizabeth. However, it is not that. It's not specifically because it's a solar eclipse. It is because it is like a ring, a circle, but the abstract, the bigness of it being a ring or a circle. And it's out in space, as you can see, all the magicness of space here. So that's more, and of course, when you have a solar eclipse, there's something in between the sun and this. So this could be a planet, not necessarily the moon, you see. Since we're going to be going to Nobilia on Sunday, it all fits in, and you'll see where the ring part comes into it. It's on the slide for that. So I don't want to give away too much, but yes. Hello, Elizabeth. Glad you're here. Glad you're here. So all right. So we're going to go over part 2 today. I know we didn't finish part 1, but it doesn't matter. We're not doing this necessarily for completeness' sake, but I do want to I do want to go through, because from next week, because I only started doing these lives now after we'd already done parts 1, 2, and 3. So from next week on, like next Monday, we'll be talking about the Sunday specifically, that, and going over what we did on the Sunday. So we're catching up a little bit because we started this a little later. So that's why we're jumping from part 1 to part 2 today, right? And just to catch up, just my own sense of completeness. I like that. So all right, seeding the dream, here we are, chapter 0, part 2. And I better put this up here so I can see your comments on the side. There we go. There we go. Now, and I put this on top. See, I like to have my desktop all organized here. See, I've got the slides, and we see this. Actually, let me show you this in the. Oh, there's no video here today. Oh, a little bit. Oh, there it comes. I was going to say there's a little bit of video. Yeah. See, it kind of reveals things, right? So just fun. It's a little slow because of the internet and the live and Zoom and all that, so you don't quite see it as smoothly as intended. But for those who are going directly to the link, you'll see that, of course. So very cool, very cool. I like that. And let's see, do we have another one? Oh, no. Right, so I'm going to skip this, reading through all this, just all these appropriates. And of course, they A terms. Of course, there are many more appropriates and appropriate intent and, impeccability, all of that. So impeccability, you can't say appropriate impeccability, by the way. Impeccability is always appropriate. So just a little different one. But still, these are just a reminder of the moreness that's involved. So. Yeah, very mysterious. Yes, Norma, and very cool. Yes, Elizabeth, absolutely. You'll see on Sunday. Little teaser. You got to have some teasers, right? That's very important. So we're going to carry on with the story as it's going, and our intent here is to very much be paying attention to. I don't want that now. Paying attention to implications, right? Because this part of the story. I don't want this. Come on, help me out here. Okay. No, it's just putting my cursor in a different way. So this part of the story is the pre-part, and we're not always touching directly on things that are related to nobleness and nobility, etc. Right? But it's the setup. But there are important parts to this, and in terms of implication, and we're bringing it right down into our world. So the focus here is, how do we move from where we are at right now to the end point of Nobilia? And we discussed a lot of this yesterday, with like a corporation doing this as a publicity campaign, and what would be involved, and going viral and getting people involved and doing it differently without competition and all of those things, right? But we're going to go a little bit more here and see what else. So, and of course, there are some parts that are specific to the story, like this with the engines. And it's a very, very significant part, as we see later. The original corporation held the secret of the engines. The breakthrough had fortunately occurred within the corporate fold. And that's kind of significant here by implication, right? So I put this in the story because if somebody outside the corporation, one of those that were just sending in their ideas of excellence, if they'd come up with the idea and developed it, it just makes it complicated from a legal point of view and controlling this. So this was greatly fortunate. Now, for all we know, somebody may have, and the gods may have just interfered there and said, no, sorry, we need this to be inside the corporate fold, right? So, and it turns out that this was one of the people within the corporation that were really connected to the noble ideal. So they understood this, and they brought it to the originator of everything, and then they went from there, right? And so this allowed them to do more. So it's just a convenient story mechanism here a little bit. I didn't want to have to deal with too much drama of bringing this in, by the way. So sometimes in stories, you have to make choices like that when you write your stories. But since it's also, a big focus of this was something that they would be working on. The individuals responsible understanding fully the magnitude of their remarkable fortuitous discovery. It had indeed been the consequence of a most incredible string of utter impossibilities coming together. Utterly anomalous, in other words, since we had those A's there. I don't think we had appropriate anomalies. No. But paying attention to anomalies is always appropriate, right? And then this is when we get to attunement much later. Anomalies are a big factor in attunement. So this is, even for the gods, this was an anomaly. They had kept their discovery completely private. Yay, discoverer, good for you. Actually, it was a couple of them, but still, taking it directly to the originator of the entire concept. From there, a plan was devised to develop, produce, and test the engines, but in segmented parts. Now, why is this significant? On this part too, none of them obvious as to their intent, or possibly leading to a guess as to their purpose. Only a few knew the real goal. This is bringing capital S strategy into matters. Yes, and capital S strategy. This is something that goes in your dictionary of power. We absolutely need to be aware of the necessity for strategy. Without strategy, we're lost. We're absolutely lost, right? So I know strategy is not always a positive concept for many. I had a friend who completely equated strategy with manipulation, and of course, the two are not connected. I mean, yes, it could be, but no, they're completely different things, right? Strategy is simply utilizing what you have to best effect. So it's inherent to impeccability. Best use of your energy, you could say, that is being strategic with your energy. Not could say, it is, right? So strategy is inherent in impeccability, one and the same. Yeah. We're absolutely making sure to use our energy to best effect, which is to use it strategically, right? And this part here of understanding the power of this, because anytime you bring in something into the world that is exceedingly powerful, you have to be super, super careful, because of course all the BMNs and the power hungry and all that, they want what you have, right? So that's why they doing this, so that they're developing it in separate parts and nobody knows what it is. It's like, okay, well, just make this. All right, well, whatever. I don't know what you're going to use it for, but does it matter? No. And because they can't even conceive that it's for a great gravity engine, they just like, whatever, somebody's crazy idea. Right. And probably there may be a bit of queuing, strategic queuing, to say, well, we're going to test some, fun thing, may even be an art project that it's for, right? You're not going to say necessarily specifically, but you'll let people's imaginations run wild, right? Use a bit of strategy there, right? It's very important that by the time the secret was revealed as a demonstrable actuality, the secret itself and its originators would be aboard a factory starship sent to the edge of the solar system, out of possible reach of anyone. Because if we go to the edge of our solar system, right there out where the asteroid belt is, for the best spaceships that we have available now, I think it's like a couple of years to get there, right? So at best, right? So that puts them effectively out of reach. And of course, you're going to see them coming long before they get there. So then you can just move, because the great gravity engines allow you to essentially jump and not travel slowly, right? So you're just jumping there. It's a very short jump. So it's like, I don't know, a couple of seconds probably, compared to a jump to the galaxy, another galaxy, which might take a couple of years, right? So because the distance is involved. So anyway, so this makes them very safe. This makes them very safe. This makes them very safe. Brilliant. Brilliant. Who is that? Who's joining? I just clicked admit, but I didn't see who it was. It's Lisa. It's Lisa. Brilliant. 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 Wonderful. 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 All right. Hello, Lisa. I'm thrilled you're here. So I'm just going over the parts here that are not necessarily specifically directly related to nobility. they setups for the story, right? And we're on part 2 now, but it doesn't matter because I'm just talking about this, about the great gravity engines, and how when they first were discovered, the originators went right to the originator of, or the discoverers went to the originator of the project and kept it secret. And then they were the first engine built to take them out to the edge of the solar system, where they would build the other spaceships, build this factory starship. The first parts of that engine, they 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 parceled it out so that whoever was building it and making this would only see a part, right? Whether it was within the corporation or contracting it outside, it didn't matter, right? So nobody would know what this is, and even afterwards, they wouldn't necessarily be able to put it together. Yes. So the strategy is the point I was talking about as you came on. Our need for strategy is so important. What about self-importance when this mission is important? How do you mean, Elizabeth? The self-importance of who? I'm not following your question there. I am keen to, though. All right, while I wait for Elizabeth's response, I'll read a bit more. Out of reach, possible reach of anyone. There they would manufacture engines as needed. In space, there they could really do it, right? So they had to get there first, though. So they have to do the first one here. Uh, Harvesting raw materials from the now easily accessible asteroid belt or anywhere the necessary materials were found. Intersolar travel now taking place near instantaneously. This original starship served as a test prototype for the community ships. The developers of the new engines would take all their family with them, indeed anyone whom they held dear, so as not to be subjected to coercion. Right? So no blackmailing and saying, hey, we're going to kill your family if you don't share the plans with us, because these engines are a huge deal, right? Anybody has them has tremendous power. Yeah. So what about self-importance when this mission is important? From the noble ideal and from impeccability, and those going on this and involved in it, this whole corporation, since impeccability is their mandate, is their corporate statement, is their corporate mission, eliminating self-importance in all of its various ways is absolutely central and key to all of this, right? It's part of their corporate mandate. It's part of the corporate culture, the corporate philosophy, much like it is here in our environment here. And it's one of the marvelous things of this environment, that self-importance is just not a factor, right? Elizabeth, does that make sense? Please, I'm keen to hear more on this, Elizabeth. So please share. I hope you're busy typing over there. I'll continue reading while you share. And jump in anytime, Lisa. You know that, right? This is what we're doing. This is not reading the story like on Sundays. Yeah, we jump in anytime, right? And discuss what comes up. But like I said, right now we're on stuff that's more mundane, but needed to be there to build the story. The factory starship became a massive ship, built mostly in orbit as large as a small town, necessary, as it would be home for a number of years to those on board. A huge spinning donut designed to simulate gravity. When you have that spinning in the donut, on the edges of it, right, you can set the spin rate so that at some point on when you go from the center out, it's going to simulate Earth gravity. So you could set this to not quite be at the very edges, so that if you go to the very edges, the gravity is a bit more, and the closer you come to the center, the closer you are to being weightless. But this is very important, and because it's a huge starship, now that inside it's so large, even though it's a curve, it doesn't, like an inverted curve, like the curve of the Earth. We don't notice it's a curve because it's too big. So you can have that in reverse as well, where you're on the inside of the curve, but you don't really see it, right? And you're living on this big curve, right? So you might, if you get a nice view, you could look up and you'll see the street that you're on, and it's kind of going upwards from you, right? So anyway, it's just the fun of being out in space, fun stuff. Although the new engines were gravity engines, using them meant affecting time as well as gravity, as the two are intricately linked, intricately and intimately linked. And as Elizabeth brought this idea of intent as gravity, it's a nice conception, yes, because intent also has its own gravity, and it has its own time shifting as well. So in other words, this point here is just that they're not using the gravity engines to simulate gravity. They're just using simple centrifugal force. Once you started spinning, it just keeps on spinning because there's no resistance, and it's pretty free, right? So you don't have to waste energy doing that. Sustained use would bring them out of sync with Earth. If they use the gravity engines, then you're going to end up in a different time. Already you're going to be somewhat out of sync, right? But not that much. Like when the astronauts go out into space and they orbit around, like on the space station or whatever. When they come back, they're a little younger than they would have been if they'd stayed on Earth. It's pretty cool. They're not exactly the same age. It's just a weird thing, right? Thus, then, the secret to intergalactic travel, manipulating time via manipulating gravity. And this is just a fun little point here that to put in for science fiction fans. Now, if you read a lot of science fiction, go ahead, go ahead, Lisa, please jump in. I saw you unmute.
Well, yeah, I couldn't help but notice for some reason how the story here parallels like the secrecy of all the different parts, and nobody would know everything. So they could how it parallels like covert government, the Illuminati, and also like the wisdom teachings, like that's a recurrent theme through life here, like on the edge of conspiracy, if you will. I mean, I think conspiracy is a word that people use also to disclose, but
exactly.
But I couldn't help but notice.
Yeah, it's a great point. So this is an unfortunate consequence, because if we think, and yesterday in the live we were really going through the steps of saying let's imagine this realistically. Like if some corporation, I just picked Amazon, said, hey, we're going to do this. Well, first of all, Amazon would have to basically start bringing impeccability on board, because, well, some people criticize them for not being so impeccable as they could be, right, in their employment practices and so on. But anyway, so that would be the first step. But then if we imagine a company like that has these resources, saying, hey, this is we're going to start this campaign, and yes, it's part of our publicity, but who knows, whatever, Amazon already has a space a program going, but they say, right, to go out into orbit in the moon and wherever, Mars or whatever. But they say, well, let's take this further. Let's start a program where we are going to go out into the stars, to a different galaxy, and reseed humanity. And we want you to submit ideas on how this could be, and we'll reward all excellent ideas, right? So if we start to imagine this as realistic, then it's kind of fun. And we see how this could very, very well realistically happen, because if something like this, where you're rewarding stuff and that, it will go viral, and then once it's viral, everybody's involved, it becomes a big thing, and it builds on itself. But then if you take the step where, all right, it's a theoretical idea, because right now we do not have the technology to go to another galaxy. I mean, theoretically you could, but if that galaxy is 1,000 light years away, even if your spaceship could travel at the speed of light, or even half the speed of light, which is theoretically possible, close to the speed of light, very difficult. But let's say half, then it's 2,000 years to get there. Now, not feasible, right? It's theoretically possible. You have those generation ships where the children, but there are a lot of problems with that. So not very feasible. But if the great gravity engines were discovered, where going to another galaxy is just within years or even months, depending on how close or how far the galaxy is. Wow, now the whole thing changes. But in the reality, since I was imagining this very real, it's not so much that it's about conspiracy or this, but it's just about keeping this secret of the great gravity engines, keeping it within this corporation, under the control of those who have the impeccability to not abuse it, right? So yes, Norma, there is this trial and testing. That's what they go out. So the first engine they build, and then they, as best they can, and instead of jumping to another galaxy, they just jump to the edge of the solar system. So it's the prototype, it is the test chip. And yes, they do all the testing they can, but in the meantime, while they do all this testing, they also, because they're out there on the edge of our solar system where the asteroid belt is, they've got access to lots of raw materials. They got all the metals and whatever you need to build all the stuff from, right? So they do all of this. But to answer your point here, Lisa, this bit of secrecy, unfortunately, and building the component parts in different places, this is to avoid it falling into the hands of those who would misuse it and abuse it, because it is an I mean, it can be applied as a weapon, of course, right? You could be anywhere you want to be within seconds, and you could put cannons or bombs or whatever on the thing, and there you go, right? So those who think that way, it's a huge deal. So it's a necessity, this, unfortunately, right? That makes sense, yes, Lisa? The necessity of keeping it completely secret, yeah?
Sure. Hmm.
Yeah. As we go through this, right? When we start to go into, when we jump to Nobilia and that whole setup there, this is something that is kept secret. It is the one and only secret of the New Nobility. Well, of the New Nobility Corporation, because it belongs to the corporation. The New Nobility, yes, technically they're all, but that's a long story. Anyway, we'll get there when that comes up. But it's the only secret, and it's the only necessary secret, right? And even if they don't know it, the people, but if they didn't keep it secret, the gods would have had to ensure that it was kept secret. Yeah. But then if they didn't have the responsibility to even think of keeping it secret, the gods may have just squashed this idea to say this is too dangerous to be allowed, right? So this is very big deal. Yes, yes. Anomalies are fun and exciting, grabbing our attention like gravity. Yes, absolutely. Secrets create space. That's a very profound statement. No, would you resonate with that somewhat, Lisa?
I'm sorry,
Elizabeth
what was
says,
the comment? What was the
uh,
comment?
secrets create space.
Hmm.
They create
Well,
bubbles.
any
Yeah.
sure, any thought creates
Yeah,
space,
yeah,
right?
but I would say, to amend your quote there, your comment, Elizabeth, secrets create a peculiar and particular space. Yeah, yeah. And if you pay attention to spaces, you can usually see that there is something secret here, because it's a distortion into the usual space-time, right? So that's why I say a peculiar and particular thing. So you have to be very careful about keeping secrets, because the very fact that you're keeping a secret is communicated, and somebody say, oh, you're keeping a secret, and then they start trying to find out what the secret is. So to not have that show is a very, very skilled and particular way of utilizing awareness and energy, and it's very difficult to do also. Now, of course, in this case, everybody knows it's a secret, and it's been kept so, and so you don't have to go to those lengths. Aspirations are the root of us. Yes, they so absolutely are. So yeah, it's just a nice thing of this donut design of this factory ship that's out there, the core stuff over here, but that's where everybody's living, and you see it's not finished yet, right? It's still being built. So all right, this won't be above a city. This will be out there at the edge of the galaxy, but nonetheless, it gave a good image. Enthusiasm for the project eclipsed all else when the mighty starships began to be assembled. Their orbit trails of reflected sunlight, making for a pretty daylight reminder of the realness of the project. Now, of course, those orbit trails are when they come to Earth to pick people up, because you won't see an orbit trail at the edge of the universe, but all right. So it's just a fun idea, though, right? Not to mention the round-the-clock media coverage, so much involved. A shortage of new material, never an issue. The inhabitants of Earth spellbound by this magic, unfolding as a real and true manifestation of the long-believed impossible. Actually, I want to change that to materialization. I'm surprised I left this in here and didn't notice that before. I'm not a great fan of this word manifestation, because it's been corrupted so much. Realization. Okay. So I prefer materialization. Now it's going to mess up my audio because in the audio I said manifestation, but oh well, it's close enough, right? So I have to be careful
That
of
is a
my,
very that's a very cool sentence.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. That's the key here, right? As a real and true materialization of the long believed impossible. And this is why I love the story so much, because it is absolutely taking something that was long believed to be impossible and running with how it could make a difference. Now, I could actually write a story that that could be very much more realistically involved, right? And I made a post about it, but as a story of a similar nature, but bring it right down to earth. The story of how sailing directly into the wind became possible, and then what developed from that. So this really happened, right? I mean, I grew up sailing, did a lot of sailing, and I think I mentioned yesterday or sometime, was really into sailing, was a bit of a prodigy sailor, and just how I am, I learned and understood everything about sailing, all the aerodynamic effects and everything. But of course, sailing into the wind was considered impossible. And if you actually go and sail, well, you know from your own personal experience it's impossible. But this is very key to understand how that became possible. Because all that the person who actually designed something, that designed a craft that can sail directly into the wind, he was able to abstract the idea of sailing and amend it slightly. So when we say sailing directly into the wind, in the usual way we mean sailing, it doesn't work. But if you take it sailing in a slightly different way, then it does. So all he did was really, so if you take sailing, right, and you're sailing 90 degrees to the wind, which is pretty easy and all good, you can sail about 45 degrees into wind. But 90 degrees, that's a good way of sailing. You get good usage of the wind and all that, right? And so all he did was he said, let's imagine those sailboats sailing onto a huge big Ferris wheel that's also 90 degrees to the wind, right? And the boat sails onto the Ferris wheel, and it kind of docks there, and it just sticks there, right? And clamps go on. Now what happens to that sailboat? It continues to sail. But instead of sailing straight along the water, because this Ferris wheel's right there on the water, right? Instead of sailing straight on it, it now starts to sail upwards, right? And at some point it will be upside down and then come back down again, right? So it continues to sail round and round, right? Does it change the boat sailing? No, not at all, because the same forces that are pressed against the water now presses against the material of the Ferris wheel, and the force gets translated, and it will start to turn that Ferris wheel. Okay. Now, of course, if you only do one, it'll go slowly, but you put a whole bunch of them on, it's all around, around they go. It doesn't change the relationship of the sail of the sailboat to the wind, right? Whether that sail is upside down or 90 degrees, doesn't matter. Same thing. So it keeps the power going. So he said, all right, well, now we've got this Ferris wheel turning. How do I make it go towards the wind? Well, I just put a propeller onto that. All right, the Ferris wheel is now turning a giant propeller, and there you go. You move towards into the wind. Now, he did this on land instead of a propeller. He just put it into gears, and it turned wheels, right? So you've got this, well, he just made it as a propeller instead of a bunch of sails going around. You've got a propeller, and you translate it into turning wheels. It's the most simplest thing ever. It's unbelievably how simple it is, right? So he just took the concept, though, of sailing, and instead of making it on a flat line, he just put it in a circle, and there you go. Right? Very simple. Very, very, very simple. And this really, it's something I think about all the time. I think, what other concepts do we hold that simply need to be rearranged slightly in order to give us a profound thing? And this just it stays with me all the time. How can we reutilize our understandings of things so that we don't get stuck? And this is where this abstract conceptuality of the dictionary of power comes from, right? When we say sailing, what do we mean? Do we mean on a sailboat or on the water? No. We mean utilization of the wind via the aerodynamic effect and leveraging it against against something, right? In this case, water, but you can leverage it against the earth, in a framework like that. Doesn't matter. Leverage, that's it. So very simple. Understand it. Now you can use it in many different ways. Very, very, very profound. So this abstract conceptuality, to be able to see this thing in its essential components so that you can apply it specifically. Like in sailing, the concept of sailing was actually conceived in a specific application, not in its abstract understanding, right? So this is really profound. And of course, that specific understanding inhibited this abstract understanding, right? And then we want to be careful of that. So when we make these points in our dictionary of power, we're truly connecting to the raw core abstract point, right? Very, very, very powerful. So this, like you said, this is a very powerful point. And the story, though, sorry, to carry on with the story about sailing directly into the wind, that's out there, and really nothing's come of it. It's just sort of this anomaly, and it's existed. It's been out for many years, but it's not actually been utilized in terms of industry and new sailboats and everything. It just died because it wasn't a big thing. Yeah, it wasn't viral. It wasn't a big thing. So there it sits, languishing. It's quite fascinating. It's really fascinating. You know what's even more fascinating about this, Lisa, or all of you, right? So when they made this thing and they started to run it up against the wind, when they fine-tuned and tweaked it a bit, and that not wildly much, but somewhat, that little craft ended up going faster than the speed of the wind into the wind. You say, how is that possible? That doesn't make any sense, right? The wind is blowing at 10 miles an hour or 10 knots, and the sailboat was able to go 15. I think they went twice the speed of it, actually. So they could go 20 miles an hour directly into the force that is propelling it. This just
Wow.
defies
Maybe
all logic, does it not?
was that because the wheel itself had its own force?
No. The thing that makes it work is apparent wind. Right. So when you're driving in a car and there's no wind blowing, right? Natural nature wind, right? When you stick your hand out the window, you feel wind, correct?
Sure.
Right. Well, that's called apparent wind. Yeah, because it's being created by your movement. Because there's air, and you traveling through the air creates wind. Yes. Now the air itself can move, which is what natural wind is, or you move through the wind, and that's apparent wind. So
Ah,
in that craft that's going directly into the wind, right? I mean, it's just a propeller there, right? So and sailboats, if you look at the modern sailboats now, they also use this apparent wind, and they can sail faster than the speed of the wind. So two things are happening. That propeller is getting the wind that's the natural wind, but as it turns, it's also creating its own apparent wind. And when you combine the two, now you end up going faster. It's pure magic to me, pure utter magic to me. It's unbelievable. It's really profound. Now, how this is not being utilized, I don't know. If I had access to funds, like if I won the lottery now, I would put research into this and doing it, because even that propeller is a very poor design. It doesn't absolutely utilize all this. Now, if you actually understand sailing a little bit, that when you sail, you have to trim your sails relative to the angle of the wind. So the faster you go, you have to kind of tighten it up a little bit, but the propeller doesn't change that. So I would design that Ferris wheel with actual sails on it. And also, the faster you go, like in light winds, you want a nice full sail. It's got like a deep belly curve to it. But when winds are very high and fast, you want it more flat and tight. So and you can change that, right? On sailboats, you can adjust that. And when you're an expert sailor, you will do that while you're sailing, and to give you your optimum effect. So when you do this on this design, you're going to really maximize this the apparent wind effect. And I feel that if you put this onto a what do they call a big heavy wheel, a momentum wheel? There's a specific name for it. I'm forgetting now. What you call it? Like a big heavy weighty wheel, and you started running, and it's got
perpetual motion.
no, not perpetual motion. Dang it. It's just all it is just a heavy wheel that stores your momentum, right? And like if you were in light winds and you had this, oh blast, it's such a simple term, it'll come to me anyway. So let's just imagine you put this onto this very heavy thing that once it gets going, yes, it takes a long time to get it up to speed. But if you've got lots of wind, this thing starts to go, and you get this momentum going into it. And then when the wind drops, it's still going. What's that wheel with the sails now? It's going to be moving the sails, right? And it's going to be creating a parent wind. So if you only need to get this started, and then this will help. And yes, over time it will wear down, but still that will give you that break between when the wind is low and there's not winds, so it will help it up. What is it called? They use it in many different applications, just because you're saving momentum, and it's a way of storing energy. um anyway, it'll come to me. But still, this is an idea for me to maximize this idea of apparent wind, right? So that if the wind dies, you're going to have that stored up energy in there, keeping the thing turning, generating apparent wind, which generates force, which makes the wheel turn, right? So you won't get perpetual motion because, well, there's a lot of reasons why that, but you're going to get very close. You're going to get very close. You're going to be, in other words, you're going to be maximizing your energy. And by the time that runs out, the wind will come back again. So very powerful thing. Anyway, I'd love to be able to optimize this with all the ways it can be optimized. But you would think that this would be a way to redesign your transport on ships and stuff like this. And you can put this on a train. Yeah. And so I don't have sail trains because, well, when the wind blows directly into the train can't move. But with this, you can. Yeah. So lots of applications. Anyway, extrapolation. See, run with things, extrapolate them all the way out. You get all these other ideas. Right. So this, this thing of the impossible becoming possible. This is a big deal, especially since the project unfolded within the lifetimes of most who had been utterly convinced no such thing could ever be possible. Like you could imagine if we were to start this corporation or get into a corporation, they come and hire us to do this. How many people would say, nah, that would never work, it's impossible? Yes. And you just know those people. You're aware of them. They're out there and they're out and about and around, right? So the naysayers. But now, what do those naysayers say when what they so loudly and vociferously declared that could never be possible, right? They just said it's impossible. Now it is. They have to change their whole thinking, yes? Well, at least hopefully. Now, I have to tell you, centrifugal force, uh, Elizabeth. All right, well, anyway, I'll comment here. Those naysayers, right? And I've seen this. When you actually prove what they absolutely declared to be impossible, when you actually prove it is, it doesn't really change them much, right? They still say, yeah, well, whatever. They're still stuck in their bubbles. They just treat it as an exception. They don't update their thinking in the totality. It's quite fascinating. Lisa dropped off. It's really, really, really quite fascinating. Right? Really, really quite fascinating. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, all right. Gambina. Maybe it's not able to, but I hope so. All right. So a centrifugal force is the force that pulls things out towards the outside of what it is spinning around, right? So when you take something heavy, like when when you were with your kids when they were young, right? You held them by the arms and you twirled around and you spun them around, right? When you're moving slowly, they kind of lower down. The faster you spin, the higher they go out like that, right? So, or if you take something on a string and you twirl it above your head, right? If you twirl it fast enough, then it flies horizontally, right? That centrifugal force that pulls it up like that, right? So it's just one of those wonderful things in nature. There's a couple of these forces that are quite fantastic. that yes, you understand how they work, but why they need to work that way, to me, just pure magic. The aerodynamic effect is one. The gyroscopic force is another, right? So gyroscopic force comes into play when you ride a bicycle. Now, when you taught your kids to ride a bicycle, what were you teaching them? You were teaching them to balance, yeah, Elizabeth? But actually, if you understand the forces involved, then you don't need to, right? Because really, what makes riding a bicycle work is, yes, Lisa again. What makes riding a bicycle work is the gyroscopic force. You don't actually have to have good balance. All you need to do is go fast enough. So what the gyroscopic force does, it's the most wonderful thing, right? So I don't have a wheel to demonstrate here, but let me go off screen share here for a second and show this, right? So if this is you know what, I actually have a bicycle wheel, but it'd be a big deal to unpack it right now, but I still wouldn't be able to easily demonstrate. So let's just say this is the axle of the wheel, right? So the wheel is going around it like this now, right? So if we take this wheel and we put it like this, right? Now the wheel is lying horizontal, and we tie a piece of string to the one end of this axle. Yes. Now, obviously, it's going to kind of hang like this, and we hang it from the ceiling, so it will kind of hang a bit skew. But if we then start spinning this wheel, right, you're going to see this wheel going from horizontal or more or less horizontal. The faster you spin it, the more vertical it will go, right? And it doesn't take much to spin it, and it will start to vertical like that, right? So you'll see this wheel hanging from the string on only one side of the axle, right? If there wasn't spinning, it would drop down like this, right? So it's the most incredible thing. You can go look it up on YouTube or wherever, right? This is called the gyroscopic effect. That things go up to vertical, a spinning wheel tries to vertical itself relative to its axis, and this is what makes your bicycle essentially balance itself, or a motorbike, right? You don't, once you go past that minimum speed where it starts to ride, you don't have to balance anymore. It's automatic. And this is when people click this, they don't know it in their minds, they don't understand it. But once you start riding a bicycle, you just know, oh well, okay, I just have to get it going, and then it balances, right? So, but we believe it's an act of balance, but that's just a belief. It's actually a false belief, right? It's only you need to balance when you're going too slow for that gyroscopic effect to work. But if you ride a bicycle, you never really go that slow, right? So, but once you get past that speed, so the key thing to teach your kids is you need minimum speed. Get up to the speed, and it takes care of itself, right? There you go. Life is easy. So very powerful, very, very powerful. Norma, well, if you design this thing, it doesn't matter which direction of the speed is, the direction of the wind, because you could simply put that Ferris wheel, you just put a fin on it, like any kind, like a windmill. You just put a tail on it, and you put it on a swivel, and it automatically adjusts to wherever the wind is blowing, right? So that's an easy problem to solve. So it doesn't matter. Now, well, when you say there are winds in our universe, no, no. Once we get out of the Earth's atmosphere, right, and the atmosphere is just the air being held close to the Earth because of gravity. But at some point, that gets very thin, and at some point you get into space where then there's no air. And this is what space is defined as mostly, right? It's empty. There's no, because other things are being pulled towards gravity. Now, space isn't completely empty. I mean, it's full of light, for instance. And light, like the wind, is a force, yes? And you can use that to propel you, and they call it light sailing now. They haven't figured out yet how to leverage that, like in the aerodynamic way that sailing is. Like in the old days with sailing, they couldn't sail towards the wind or even across the wind. They could just sail with the wind pushing them and maybe a little bit off to the side, right? And that's how it would be with solar sailing, where you're using actually sunlight, because it actually does have some force to it, because light is both a particle and a wave. So it's a very
Well,
unusual thing.
and
Yeah.
now, the new science is kind of pointing towards that space is not empty at all. You know,
Oh,
that
exactly.
dark
Exactly.
matter and other
Right.
forces are
Exactly.
where we thought there's space, there it's
Exactly.
not empty. Yeah.
Exactly. So And to me, I see dark matter as being intent. Yeah, and that explains when you
Me
really get
too.
into
Me too. Makes total
exactly.
sense.
Exactly. Then all of physics starts to make sense when you take dark matter as intent. And our little bubble, like dark matter is, what is it, 87% or something, 90%, whatever. It's the majority of stuff. So it tells us that what we perceive as reality is a fraction of the whole. And this is just us materializing the intent, that's the raw energy, into something that we can utilize and go. Right. So this is very cool. So out in space, there's not wind, as it were. In the normal sense, what we call wind is air moving. Right? That's what wind is, right? Or movement through wind as an apparent wind. But out in space, there's all sorts of different forces and energies and radio waves, solar waves, all the stuff, right? All the different electromagnetic radiation. So space is not truly empty. No, it's filled with all sorts of stuff, but most of them aren't what we would consider physical, right? Now, sunlight is a crossover, right? It doesn't actually have mass, but yet it can act as if it has mass. Like you can't weigh a light. No, mind sunlight, any light. You can't weigh it, but yet it can act as if it has mass, which is the most fantastic thing. Yeah. Brilliant, Sarah. Brilliant, brilliant. I'm so pleased you, yeah, Sarah, and I'm so pleased you comment and say,
So
many
what
people.
is Sarah's comment? It might help the video if when
Oh,
you're
oh,
reading from
oh,
the
oh,
chat,
sorry.
if you,
Yeah,
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 go
yeah.
ahead
Well,
and
yeah,
say who said what. Repeat
yeah,
the
yeah.
question and then answer.
Well. Normally I do, Lisa. Normally when I'm screen sharing like this, even if I have what I'm reading from, you see the comments on the side. You see. So normally I just was ending the screen share. So Sarah Lynn said, "This is a beautiful discussion. Thank you." Yes, yes. Thank you for commenting, Sarah. That's what I wanted to say. That the comments, because so many come and they just watch and they just observe, and I don't know they're there. So when you say something, any one of you, even if you just say hello, hi, leave a smiley face, whatever, this lets me know you there, and now you're included. That's it. And to me, this is a big deal. This is a very big deal, that inclusivity. So please share and ask and comment. A lot of people they're but shy to do this. Not in this environment. Yeah, you can say things that, whatever you can say. It doesn't matter whether they make sense or not. It doesn't matter. And so, yeah, you can share anything. Everything is open to it, right? We're not going to, again, like came up earlier about self-importance. We're not going to make fun of your comment even if it doesn't make sense. We'll just discuss it. That's all, because we're not. That's not our objective. We're not connected to the superiority paradigm where, oh, I've got to be important. Oh, I've got to be clever. No, no. Yeah. We're about sharing, and not about being clever. In different paradigm. So very important. So I love this. Yes, and again, when we start to, I like to take the practical things like this, all this things that I'm discussing about these different forces, and to say, oh, it's related to capital U understanding, like with a bicycle. Once you actually understand how that gyroscopic effect works, and it automatically rights the wheel when it's spinning, right? Like the wheel will lie flat, you spin it, it rights itself. When you understand this, it actually makes riding a bicycle so much easier. Yeah, that's why. Have any of you ever seen instructions for riding a bicycle? Never. I don't think bicycle riding comes with instructions, because the typical instructions, and if you watch parents trying to teach their kids to ride, they're trying to teach them to balance, which is not what you need, right? Not what you need. You need the speed. So it's probably why they don't come, because they realize it's not going to work. So pretty cool. Very cool. So I'm getting to this deeper point that we want capital U understanding. When we understand the underlying forces, we can use them, like this with the gyroscopic effect with bicycles, right? And like with the sailing, and just with life in general. Now, right, those are physical forces, but we also want to understand the more abstract forces, like self-importance. Self-importance is a profound force in our world. It causes so much trouble, right? It's a really, really big deal. So when we understand it, then we can unhook from it, and we can reutilize it, and leverage it, and do all sorts of things with it, right? So this capital U understanding, this is a theme throughout everything that we do. All right, let's continue reading here. So jump in, Sarah. I love that you're here. The Cedars, too, morphed in the minds of the public. They came to be known as the Noble Superheroes, a name the Cedars, as they insisted on referring to themselves, found uncomfortable. Of course, they're going to find it uncomfortable because noble superheroes, this is something that's coming from the superiority paradigm, right? And it's a typical thing. Yes, you're going to go out into space. You're doing a big deal. Okay, you're a hero, superhero. Okay, noble. It's all putting it together. It's like a duh sort of a name to come. But because they're not focused on self-importance and all of this, it makes them a little bit uncomfortable because it's the wrong kind of attention. I don't want to be thought of as a superhero. I'm doing something special. I'm being like this is giving me lots of status, etc. Right? I mean, the typical person involved in the superiority paradigm. Ah, this is cool, but cool for the wrong reasons. Yes, so that's why they don't care for this term. However, this name allowed for an appropriate perspective on the core ideological drivers of the project, those originators of the original concept, those who comprised the core of the founding corporation, the new Nobility Corporation. So this noble superheroes, it started to connect, and yes, so the corporation and those running the project kind of allowed this name to go because it's got noble in it, and it's really bringing this point home that this nobility, the noble ideal, etc. This is a big deal, and that's why it's called the new nobility, because it's not nobility in the old sense of heredity and titles and all that nonsense, which is complete distortion of nobility, and it's all superiority paradigm nonsense. So it enables them to make this distinction and the separation. So very useful for sharing the core understandings of what's going on. Right? That's it. We want that deep underlying understanding. As the starships neared completion, the public by then thoroughly understood the mammoth undertaking involved, the uncertainty, the challenges, the risks, the enormity of the difficulties the noble superheroes would face in settling unknown planets, even if they were deemed habitable. Adding to these physical challenges, the ever-present ideological goal always maintained front and center. Merely settling a new world was not nearly enough. So this is that's why they're noble superheroes, because they are looking to start humanity afresh, start humanity in such a way that what comes later and doesn't devolve into the wars and all the stuff that comes from the different ideologies and politics and religions and whatever, right? So they are looking to start to seed humanity afresh to avoid that, and that's a big challenge. So physical settlement, yes, it's a challenge, but that's a minor challenge compared to this challenge of making sure that humanity is starting off where it won't degenerate into the same nonsense that we have now, right? I mean, look at this all the problems we have, poverty, the discrepancies in income and wealth and all of the stuff, poor usage of resources, abuse of the planet, etc. I mean, the list is long, right? That can all be avoided. None of it has to be so. Not any of it has to be so. We have the means, especially in this technological age. We absolutely have the means to feed everybody. We're already producing enough food for everybody. A lot of it goes to waste, right? Stuff like that. If all the wealth was distributed a bit more evenly, everybody would have more than enough. There would be no poverty, etc., etc., etc. Right? But in order for that to happen, you have to unhook from the superiority paradigm and come to a new one, which is why we are here. We are exploring alternative paradigms. Not that the paradigm that we're exploring itself is necessarily a solution, but it's there to just say, oh, other paradigms are possible. They are possible, right? And in that we start, right? And once you start on this, the impossible becomes possible. Once you have one, others can happen. Yes. So this is a big deal that we're shifting this understanding and drawing attention in this shifting of an alternative. The alternative to what? Well, our default paradigm. Well, what's wrong with the default paradigm? Well, it's a superiority paradigm. Oh, I never thought of it that way. Oh, now, I see. Oh, okay, yeah. All right. And then you start to understand the problems involved. So this is something that paradigms do. When you're in it, you don't even realize you're in it. So we have to draw attention to that. And that's what, part of the intent of these sharings is that, right? Many intents, but that's one of them. The goal to settle them physically and to start humanity off with a new cultural foundation, which would avoid the endless wars, pointless struggle, and needless suffering. Not just a cultural foundation, but an ideological foundation, philosophical, spiritual foundation. But I just lumped that all into cultural. Especially the goal was to end the dominance of the superiority paradigm. When their descendants eventually met other species, humanity hoped they would be proud of its representatives. Those seeders would exemplify the formerly believed impossible made possible, just as the entire project did. Now, that's a very nuanced, little bit of a subtle point there, right? And this is to say that what was formerly believed impossible, for instance, a world in which caring, kindness, generosity, courtesy, nobility, thoughtfulness, all right, moreness, impeccability. If you were to ask the average person today, do you think this is realistically possible in our world? They would tell you absolutely not. Right? I
Well,
think
and
Ramsey made a comment yesterday. Go ahead, Lisa.
I like that it starts out when their descendants
Exactly.
eventually met, because they're
Yeah.
acknowledging that this isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take
Exactly.
time.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And that this is a culture that needs to first prove itself, feed on itself, build on itself, right? Before you go and messing with other species. But beside which, you're going to inhabit another planet. Now, yes, if the thing goes as planned, and at least before the chaos began and the gods got involved and spread them all over, even if it had gone originally where all these 1,000 spaceships, because that's how many go out, and each spaceship has a couple of thousand people, so it's millions of people going out there, and the idea was to settle the first world first, right? One world, this millions of people, and have this new culture going. But from there, technically they would have been able to go and meet new species, but they wouldn't, because they wanted to make sure that they stabilized first and that they can prove that they are free from the superiority paradigm. Because make no mistake, if we go today, as much as I am absolutely 100% want nothing to do with the superiority paradigm, I know it really well. I have to, because this is part of the training of what we do, because otherwise how are you going to deal with the world? So but still, though, many of the habits and the ways of thinking, these are deeply entrenched in those who grew up in the superiority paradigm. So you want a couple of generations where, by the time, my great 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 grandchildren are this, the superiority paradigm. Oh, this is a story great grandpappy used to talk about, right? It's like, well, yeah, but what is it really? Oh, all right, I can go look it up in the database, but yeah, well, it becomes this theoretical thing rather than something that's in actual memory and also in our DNA. We want to weed it out a little bit, right? You asked about DNA, Norma, and yes, our DNA does carry over things now. Just because we have a proclivity or a propensity towards something in our DNA, it doesn't mean that we are bound to it. Yes, physically sometimes, but even that you can overcome, right? So take something like alcoholism. Yes, it has a genetic component, right? A DNA component. But just because you have that, let's say the alcohol, to be an alcoholic is in your DNA, in your genes. Not all people who have that become alcoholics, right? Especially if they're aware of it. So you can override your DNA, is what I'm trying to say, right? With some things, maybe, okay, you get a totally genetic disease and that's it. You kind of stuck with it. But as we go further into understanding these things, more and more we're seeing how these things aren't an absolute, right? As we believe they were in the beginning, right? You got it and that's it. You stuck with it. No. At least it's very clear that on some of them, absolutely not. And when it comes to psychological things, like, all right, you had parents who had bad tempers and you inherited this from them, right? This gene doesn't mean you have to have a bad temper. Yeah, you can go against your DNA, right, and override it and do. But in this point about the descendants, we want all of the superiority paradigm gene to get really started to many generations. Probably, I don't know how many you would need, but I would imagine, something like a century or two, yeah, before you start to now want to go and mess with other things. Yes, at least to have the stuff completely out of the question, because of course you are going to have that I always struggle with this word. Reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
No, it's the gene that like when everybody in your family has dark hair and suddenly you come up with red hair or blonde hair.
Or
And
recedent.
recessive
That's
gene, that's the word, recessive. But it's recidivistic is what I wanted to say. That's the word, recidivistic gene, right? To go back to that far part like that, or recessive gene. You want all that worked out, right? So if somebody does come up, they are completely an anomaly. And you have cultural mechanisms in place, because now, of course, you started off with a culture that's not one that's based on superstition and poor education, that they're going to be in full awareness of all these things. So as you grow up, you're going to be, if somebody comes and suddenly they're showing these superiority paradigm tendencies, yes, of course, the education is going against that, but there's going to be an awareness that this is a person that needs to be paid attention to, because that's exactly the person who's going to try and take over everything and start, a dictatorship and all of this, right? And so you really want to be paying attention to the stuff. But when it's like so far down the line, it's going to be exceedingly exceptional and rare, and you can deal with it, right? And this does happen as the story goes forward. Because of the dispersal, well, let's read a bit more, and then when we get to that part, I'll mention it. So that does actually happen. Elizabeth says, the vision of being proud of representatives is thrilling and longed for by me. Oh, you just pause a second there. Elizabeth, you are now articulating what for me is why I put this in so specifically. And it's a confirmation that my understanding, my logic of those who I feel would grab onto this. And also, it's a confirmation of why I feel this whole project is very plausible if it were to be started. Because absolutely, that idea of your representatives, your descendants being these representatives, is thrilling and longed for. I feel this is most people who have children, to know that their descendants aren't just going to be basically left to the whims of the world, right? But they are going to be in a community, a culture that is giving them the best possible opportunity to be the best of humanity. Yeah, I mean, now if
oh,
you
and
have descendants, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
yeah. Well, Elizabeth's statement
Yeah,
there, I mean, it like touches at, I think it touches at the a core wound for
exactly,
most of us right now. I
exactly,
mean, we all
exactly,
long for that, whether we voice it
exactly,
or not.
exactly. And even
Yeah.
if we don't have children, yes, I mean, like, I don't
Exactly.
have children, and as far as I know, you don't have any children, right? So, but it doesn't
Right.
matter. It doesn't change this idea, because even though I might not personally have children, they are descendants of humanity. Us, yeah, this whole earth. It's our collective descendants, and that so I have a part in that. Whether I direct, no, doesn't matter. They are still my descendants, right? I'm still related to them because we're related to everybody, right? So yes, Elizabeth, this is such a profound, beautiful, beautiful point. And actually, I'm going to add this to the program. I'm going to tweak your quote just that little bit, take some liberty with it, and maybe then I won't attribute it. I'll just make it for all of us, right? I'll just attribute it to all of us. Look at my
Well,
love.
while you're doing that, I just wanted to point out a bit of
Please.
a little anomaly I've been noticing, like that little warning sign that keeps popping up in the lower right-hand side of the screen. It's like saying that do you see it? It's
Uh-uh.
like saying that you don't see it?
See what?
You don't see the little black warning sign with the
Oh,
big.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
That
well,
comes.
you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes.
when you read it,
Yeah,
it says,
yeah.
that it's something about the voltage is
Voltage.
higher
Yeah, yeah,
than
yeah,
normal. Well, and
yeah.
it's interesting because, it's like saying, like like the energy of this discussion is exceeding the normal limits.
Yes, 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 yes. It's a warning from my operating system. It's actually a false warning to say that, well, if my CPU were to overheat, I'd get a warning to say it's overheating. And this is just giving me, and why it's this warning that the voltage is higher. I don't know. I get it all the time, and I've just sort of gotten used to it by now. So I'm going to adjust this here a little bit, Elizabeth. Look, and I'm going to do this. No, I don't want to do that. Come on. Uh, I want to go Shift R, not Control R. The vision of being proud of our descendant representatives is thrilling and longed for by me. Yes, right. The connectors put descendant in there, and by combining them as this understanding, right? Descendant representatives. It's saying they aren't only descendants, but also representatives, right? So this is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful point here, yeah. And and now I actually don't want to attribute this to you specifically, Elizabeth, because we're also sharing in it. Yes, Norma says so I feel Norma is there too. Yes, that this is something that's a big deal. Sarah, I've got to assume this connects with you too. Yes. So what can I call us here? Uh,
The
I, I, I-
witnesses to this story.
I'm going to call us conceptual originators. Yeah. What about that? Aren't we originators of this concept? Oh, why can't I type here now? What's going on? What were you going to say? Sorry, I didn't hear all that you said. Lisa, please say again.
Oh no, I was just throwing out who we
Oh,
were, like
right,
witnessing
right.
witnesses of the story or the witnesses.
Yeah, right. But we more than witnesses. You see, we are participants. Yes. So that's the word. Not originator, conceptual, um, uh, origin, concept, participants. But for whatever reason, it's not letting me type now. I don't know what's going on. See, I can't access this. It's either frozen or something. Oh, yeah, yeah. All right. So origin, concept, participants. Right. We are all participating in the origin concept. Yeah. Of seeding the stars. Yeah. Or we could call ourselves proto-seeders. That's kind of a nice, nice one too. I don't know what's happened here. So let me
Do
stop
you have
screen
to hit
sharing.
that? What if you hit that little pencil? See the pencil
No,
on the.
the pencil does something else. It's
Oh,
the page is frozen. Like when I hold my mouse over
oh,
it now, it's got the hourglass there, so the page is on freeze. But I like this. I like that we are proto-seeders. Yes, because this could realistically
okay.
happen in our timeline. This all of what I said, I mean, at least the first part of it, not the great gravity engines, but this concept of putting it out there. And should it be put out there by a corporation and go viral and all that, right? We'd absolutely be involved in it. We'd be proto-seeders, yes, because hey,
Well, isn't that
going.
what we're doing now? We're putting it out there.
Exactly, exactly, and that's why we are proto-seeders. I mean, we may actually end up going on the spaceship, but actually we're seeding. We are the prototypes, the originators, the origins, the early seeders of the concept. Exactly. By going live with this, I'm seeding this idea, seeding this idea of shifting paradigm, seeding this idea of a place, an environment where we can share, discuss without having the normal nonsense of the superiority paradigm involved. So Oh, yeah, it's completely frozen and blocked. So, yeah, all right. All right. Well, you know what? There's always many ways to fry a pancake. Yes. Oh, Chrome is unresponsive. Relaunch now. No, Chrome. Don't be doing this. Okay. Well, let me try some other mechanism. Right. No, that's not what I want. I have a little program that clears my file cache and frees up the RAM, which is being too much used now. So clear memory now, and let's see. Yeah, there we go, back down. All right, that's more manageable now, but it's still stuck. All right, well, you know what? Just the universe saying end it now, because I've got things to do. I've got a place to go to, right, Lisa? So
Yeah,
I don't want to.
I think he
I don't
might
want.
be there. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, really? He's there already?
I think possibly. I saw the
Oh,
door
okay.
open.
Oh. How did you see the door open?
Smart things, it's all
Wow.
technologically, AI.
Wow.
I got my eyes out there.
Wow, brilliant, brilliant. I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that, Lisa. Very fantastic. All right. So wonderful, wonderful all of you being here, and I just, the comments and everything. This is a huge deal. I will remember to come back when my my computer's decided to free itself up. I will come back and finish that quote by us as proto-seeders. So thank you, Elizabeth. I know I'm adopting your quote there, but since we also resonate with it, I feel that you voicing it on our behalf. So again, we don't have self-importance, so the attribution is totally relevant. It's appropriateness that counts. So this becomes a quote from all of us. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. This is really cool. I love that you voiced this for us, and you voiced your heart, and that's what I just love. When we voice our hearts, we tend to speak for others who have that deep intent to goodness. It's core. It's prime. So, all right, I've got to go and take care of something for Lisa in the real world. And that's where I'm off to. That's what we were chatting about. Just helping her out there. So, all right, I'll see you guys next time, which would be tomorrow. So I love this. I love this. Love you all too. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.